Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Soapbox Slam, where I get on my soapbox and I slam the things that I see going on. Tonight's soapbox is it has to do with what's in the news right now about Nikki Haley and her Civil War comment. Also, something I want to make a note on is kind of two things that I probably should make two separate soapboxes about. But there was also a poll that was issued about Israel and Hamas and the war going on, and I'm gonna do a second one tonight about that. But let me do the first one, and this one is about Nikki Haley and her comment about the Civil War. Nikki Haley is a candidate for Republican presidential candidate, and she wants to be the Republican nominee for the upcoming presidential election. Nikki Haley is the governor of South Carolina, and she was a UN ambassador for the United States of America. Now, she's from South Carolina. That's the state in which she governed, and like I said, she was at UN as a UN ambassador for the United States of America. Nikki Haley is half Caucasian and half South Asian, Indian, and ironically, so is Kamala Harris, is half Jamaican, half black, and half South Asian Indian. It's just funny how those two women are on the political stage, and they're kind of like the polar opposites. Those women, but that's who Nikki Haley is. She has a few daughters. She's married. She had some. She sits on the board of Boeing and some of the other big corporations. She's had a big change in her income. These are just little tidbit facts of who Nikki Haley is. As I've said in other posts, you can look back, or you can go on YouTube and see. I have a ton of Soapbox Slams that are posted on YouTube. Just type in Soapbox Slam, and a couple of the ones I covered two debates on Soapbox Slam, possibly three, but I talked about in those debates who I would support as a Republican nominee, and my biggest support is for Chris Christie. I do not think that Nikki Haley is a viable candidate. However, having said that, she's been surging and doing well in the primary, or in the polls of the primary. She's polling very well, and she's challenging Donald Trump. Not significantly, but she's the next front runner. Donald Trump is still the front runner. However, I already said in those posts, and I still maintain, that I do not support Nikki Haley. I think she's a nice enough lady, and I think she's pretty rational as a Republican, and I think she deserves to be a major player in the Republican Party. But I don't think she's capable of full leadership. I think she can be controlled. I think she is. I think she can be controlled by the dollar and by the real puppet masters of American politics, right? And unfortunately, I don't think she has enough backbone to be an independent woman. I think she does a wonderful job just demonstrating that she can do everything a man can do. But we are men and women are women, and to me, it's a big turnoff to have women want to excel and mimic the same things that men do. Then what's the point at that point? Be a woman and excel at what is stereotypically, and I put that in quotes, stereotypically, but excel at what a woman's role, and this may be antiquated thinking, is. I don't think it's a society that is so gender neutral that a woman does everything that a man can do and proves that she can do everything that a man can do and acts and behaves and make decisions the way men would make decisions. I think there is a purpose for the duality of male and female, and I think that excelling as a woman and excelling and being the best empath, being the best compassion, being the highest form of that, but with the most rationality, is more attractive out of a woman than a woman who can do everything that a man can do. then what's the point? I mean, who cares then at that point? Any woman or any man can do the job, but everybody's executing the same mentality as a man. And I think Nikki Haley would just do that. So I'm not impressed with her. I don't think she has a backbone to be an independent woman. She's strong, but I don't think she has a backbone to be an independent woman. I think she has a backbone to mimic and do everything that a man would do and make decisions that men would make, and prove that she can do that. And I don't agree with that. I'd rather just deal with a man. Chauvinistic and everything else, I apologize. It's not, I don't hate women. I love women. But that's a totally different topic. Why I don't support and why Nikki Haley is in the news right now is because Nikki Haley made a comment about the Civil War. And when she was asked what was the cause of civil war, she actually answered the question accurately. And I'm sorry that, you know, many of you are offended by the fact that she never mentioned the word slavery, but she actually answered the question accurately. The issue was about states' rights. Now, it just so happened that the southern states wanted the right to maintain slavery, but she didn't mention that. And that was part of the issue with slavery and the South succeeding, because they kept hiding behind it's our right as a state to make a decision for whatever we want as a state. It's our right as a state to make those decisions. And if they decide to have slavery, then that's their God-given right as an independent state to do that. So they hid behind states' rights to execute slavery. So in a technical sense and in reality, she is right. The issue that made states want to succeed was the fact that they did not want the government telling them that they had to get rid of slaves and pay for wages. So slavery turning into a capital economic system based on monetary wages as opposed to slavery is the issue, is a part of the issue. And the other part of the issue is states' rights, the independent rights of states, and government stepping in to make states do what they want to do. And there's a fine balance between that, right? When should the government step in and execute a national agenda over what the states want to do, right? That's a very serious question. And that's what the democratic process is supposed to negotiate about. But so her answer was right. She refused to talk about slavery, but let's not get this twisted, okay? Number one, slavery was never mentioned in any of the documents, and it was always a problem. I mean, England had already abolished slavery long before we actually had a civil war, or before we abolished slavery, and everything else. Other countries, Spain, Portugal, England, the Netherlands, Dutch, they all had already established, abolished slavery. It was, the United States was one of the longest ones to hold out on the abolishment of slavery. But our founding fathers, since its inception, never wanted to use the word slavery in our documents. And it was always a very hot debated topic in our entire inception. The controversy of slavery, which is something we never learned, and it's ironic that we're talking about what's going on in Israel, and we as human beings have never learned the error of slavery, whether the Jew versus Hebrew, I want to be clear, because whether the Hebrew people who got Moses' messages from God, right, slavery was wrong, let the people go, slavery was wrong way back then, and yet we still implemented slavery years later. We never learned the lesson from the Hebrews and Egypt because we continued to instill slavery in human behavior, right? So fast forwarded to the 20th, 21st, the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, we still impose slavery. And even though we don't have slavery as it was in those centuries, slavery still exists today. And it is in the form of what we call human trafficking. Human trafficking is slavery. It is 100% slavery. It's just modernized and repackaged into a new name. So we still have slavery today, and we still have no laws on the books, or minimum laws on the books. They're usually state by state when it comes to that kind of thing. So human trafficking is a form of slavery, and slavery does still exist today, just not in the form that it existed in the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th and 21st centuries. But we as human beings have not learned our lesson about slavery, and we should have learned the lessons with the Hebrews and Moses, but we haven't, because we still, as in society and still as human beings, practiced it and executed it even more horrifically as time went on. But the point I make is Nikki Haley wasn't necessarily wrong about her comment saying that it's about states' rights. The Civil War is about states' rights. It was. The states hid behind slavery and used states' rights as the reason to succeed. That's accurate. It was that. That is why they didn't have the right to maintain their slaves, and the North was going to make them stop, and they were going to succeed from that because they didn't have the right to make decisions over their own existence and their own laws and regulations as an independent state. She refused to talk about slavery, and the founding fathers and several other presidents and several other people refused to talk about slavery. And there's a very important reason, and there's another article. There's actually, if you are literate enough to want to read some of the writings of Thomas Jefferson, some people love Thomas Jefferson, some people love some of the other founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, even President Washington. They all talk about how part of the reason why they never wanted to introduce slavery into legal documentation was they never wanted it to be about the racial identity that was emerging, right? Racial identities that were emerging in our societies. They never wanted that. They wanted everyone to be viewed as humankind, mankind. Okay. Now, Nikki Haley made the comment that it was never intended to be one government for everybody or one law for everybody, and the government wasn't going to impose. I think she's wrong in that perspective. There are a lot of people who are on the conservative side who feel that way, and I don't think that that's the best way to govern people or the best way to run government. I think that you have to have some government intervention, right? And that is the biggest conundrum in a democratic society where, like slavery or let's say marijuana laws or other laws where abortion or whatever the case may be, at what point does the government step in and say, this is the national standard versus allowing the states to make decisions? Because if you allow the states to make all the decisions that the states want to make, they'll probably reimpose segregation. They'll probably reimpose separate but equal laws. They'll probably reimpose abortion laws. They'll probably reimpose things that are not advantageous to all Americans. And so some might say, well, then if you don't like what that state does, move to another state. That's an option. Maybe some of the answers to that is states that don't have these kind of discriminatory laws create a fund and fund the move and the migration out of the states that do create those kind of laws, right? So we enable, or the federal government step in and say, well, we're not going to tell the states what to do, but what we are going to do is we are going to provide funding to get those people out of those kind of places, right? That's a way to combat the problem, right? So that's a solution to the problem. I'm just saying there are other options that we can do other than just completely legislate, right? Because the more laws that you have on the books, the less free a society becomes. And the United States of America has more laws than any other society, government, whatever else in the world. But yet we claim freedom, right? But there's so many laws on the books. So what Nikki Haley was trying to stress in her comment, which made her an ignorant leader, was that she didn't articulate clearly that, yes, you know, it was about states' rights and the states were trying to hide behind slavery by using states' rights as a reason to succeed. That's how she should have answered the question. She's accurate. States' rights is what made them finally secede. The pressure that made them stand on states' rights was slavery. So it's a two-part question, and she didn't answer it correctly, which means that she's an ignorant leader, but it doesn't mean that she was wrong. She only got one part of the statement correct, and she didn't articulate it right. So I'm on my soapbox about that because I find it kind of petty that this is the kind of news coverage that she's receiving. And again, I am not a Nikki Haley supporter. She's not my candidate. I don't particularly think that she is a good leader, right? But that doesn't mean that I can't delineate right and wrong and positive, negative statements and things like that. Like, I mean, we as people have to stop forcing tribalism down people's throats and say, oh, well, you said that, so you're on that side, and da-da-da-da, and I can't like you, and I don't respect you, and that has to stop, right? That totally has to stop, right? And so, you know, I don't condemn Nikki Haley for how she answered the question, because she was quite accurate. She just only got one part of the answer articulated, and there's a second part to that answer, and that includes slavery and how the southern states manipulated states' rights due to slavery and hid behind states' rights because they didn't want to deal with slavery. And so she wasn't she wasn't a very prepared leader. She hasn't thought these things through prior to being. So, I mean, so it demonstrates not necessarily what she thinks about slavery. I don't think she thinks slavery was a good thing, but I think that she hasn't spent a lot of quality time understanding the negative effects of slavery in society, and the after effects of slavery in American society. I don't think she pays attention to that. And I don't think many Americans, particularly on the Republican side, I don't think many Americans understand or empathize or care about the long-term effects of what slavery, Jim Crow, and the lack of Reconstruction. Because remember, we started Reconstruction, but as soon as the presidency changed, Reconstruction was dismantled. So there was a plan in place to get to assimilate and get African Americans upwardly mobile to the same level and degree as other Americans, but that was dismantled. It wasn't reparations; it was Reconstruction and reassimilation. Not again. It was not reparations; it was reassimilation and Reconstruction, and so I just don't think that she, like many Americans, refused to accept, acknowledge, empathize, and take responsibility for the for the lack of investment, and it would have been an investment in making that segment of the population, the newly freed slaves, upwardly mobile in American society. I mean, imagine how much better our society would be if we had the contribution of many innovative, way more innovative African Americans. And we've had plenty of wonderful, innovative contribution from African Americans. But as a percentage, again, I talk about the bell curve, you know, we had outliers, absolutely. And our outliers, well, that's another topic, but our outliers are minimally acknowledged in our society. But the medium of African Americans have been left behind. And that continues. And a lot of people refuse to empathize, acknowledge, or see how that is an after effect that is still pervasive in our society due to slavery, Reconstruction or deconstruction, Jim Crow, and the kind of laws and ostracizations of African Americans that has occurred. And it didn't just occur in the South, it also occurred in the North. And it's still prevalent. It's more subsidious, it's more insidious, but prevalent in our society still today. Modern examples are redlining and when it comes to loans and all kinds of different issues. But this is not a topic about race relations in America. This is a topic about Nikki Haley's comments and why she lacks leadership skills, because she's not prepared to understand and articulate clearly the double side of that question. My candidate, I haven't been following politics. I've been so ecstatic with loving my family that I haven't really watched the news until like yesterday and today. And so now I have a lot more material to get on my soapbox about, and the holidays are over. So I can get back to work when it comes to Soapbox Slam. And that's what I wanted to talk about as far as this slam. Nikki Haley wasn't wrong, but she's not a leader. It was about states' rights, but the states' rights they were hiding slavery behind their states' rights, and that was wrong. And she refused to say that part. And that's why, is it worth all of this? No, I'm disappointed in the media, liberal media and conservative media, making this a topic of discussion. There's a lot more to talk about, and there's a lot more for us to worry about than to worry about a leadership blunder like this. Unless they're willing to tell her to go back to school and learn more about the effects of how slavery has affected society as a whole, and deconstruction, how it has affected society as a whole. Because make no mistake about it, people, make no mistake about it, and I'll wind this up. Your we're not racist. Your bigotry and prejudice, because racism is about power and superiority, and that has significantly subsided in our society. But the bigotry and the prejudice is still prevalent in our society. Just know that your bigotry and your prejudice is holding our innovation, prosperity back. It's holding it back. You have to, if we are going to succeed as a country, and I don't have all the faith in the world that we will. I do hope, but I don't believe. I lose a lot of confidence in us because of it. But you have to realize that if you can't bring everybody up and get them to be innovative and contributors into society, then at a certain point they will tear it all down. And you will get to a point that those numbers outnumber you, and you will pay the consequence of it. So it's in our best interest to get everybody educated properly, get everybody the tools as far as good education, as far as making prices of internet and things like that price point so low that, because in Texas 40% of the entire Texas population doesn't have access to the internet. People in impoverished areas and in rural areas don't have access to internet. Internet is only a luxury to people who live in areas where internet is easily accessible, and they pay a high price for it. And that's a whole nother topic in itself. So anyways, Nikki Haley, not a good leader, made a political blunder that the media is blowing way out of proportion. And nobody wants to sit down and be like, okay, she is right. It's just she refused, as did the states, to acknowledge how slavery was what these states were hiding behind. But the bigger issue is states' rights. And it's always been an issue. And that's why any state would want to secede. If they want the right to do something and the federal government tells them no. Again, that's a part of the democratic process. And what point does the government step in and say, this is how we want to represent ourselves as a country? And that's when it steps in. And I think that is a popular vote. It's a popular vote, not an electoral vote. It's a popular vote. And unfortunately, the popular vote, if you don't like the popular vote, maybe you got to reconsider where you are. Or maybe you got to consider, if you want to get the popular vote more in line with your vote, maybe you got to figure out how to give up some of your attitudes about things and kind of reach so that we can all assimilate to one common goal and become Americans again. So that's my soapbox about Nikki Haley and this whole media hoopla about her comment. All right, have a good one. I got another one coming for you, and it's about Hamas and Israel, and it's about how the media is reporting about it. There's a lot, since that's the war, to talk about, and I have a lot to say about it, but I'm careful about all the things that I say right now, because I want to make sure I have receipts and a green screen when I really go in on the injustice and how we as Americans are on the wrong side of this, and we really are. But that's not what this topic will be about. I'll get on my soapbox and I will talk about that in a second. Have a good night, and I'll see you guys soon, all right? Be kind, be good, try your best. It's much harder to be kind and love your neighbor. It's way easy to be evil and mean and get back at people, and that's a lot easier to succumb to. So try not to succumb to your worst animalistic behavior. Be kind. All right? And I'll be back with you soon.